spent 30 years in cybersecurity, and I'm mostly hands-on, very technical vulnerability research guy, doing that to these days. But what excites me about about third-party risk management is that, you know, we all love to talk about how cybersecurity problem is not an IT or a technical problem, but a business problem, which is to some extent true. This one is really a business issue, okay? Because, yeah, at the end of the day, it's CISO budget. At the end of the day, we sell to the CISO. But the process of monitoring and vetting our third parties and vendors involves a large part of the organization. That's legal, that's procurement, that's the actual business owners, okay, that initiated the contracting process. So for me, it's very exciting to go from that very technical vulnerability level issues to being a real business problem. And as I said, I'd like this to be interactive. I'll start with a couple of questions that I think are probably setting up the stage for this, but do feel free to interrupt me at any point, come up with your own questions, and we'll get this going. So I think one of the major questions is, why is this becoming such a hot issue? Why is this becoming such a pressing issue? Because honestly, you know, if you look back 10, 15 years, okay, we always had this clause in our contracts with our vendors or subcontractors and whatnot that says you have to maintain a certain security posture, and you know what, we're also allowed to check it from once in a while. So why is this rising up as an issue that requires a product-like solution? I think answer is threefold. One is how modern business operate, which is we're trying to outsource and subcontract almost everything that is not the core business. So when everything goes out, the number, just the sheer numbers of companies and individuals outside of our domain that we need to interact with and share data with and get software from just rises exponentially. So it's a size problem. Second, it's regulation. And regulations started to say, hey, you need to take responsibility for vetting third party. You need to take responsibility for information you received and you give to other parties. And you cannot say, well, they promised me to do this and that and they're not doing. So it's not my responsibility. Regulation says, yes, it's your responsibility. And once regulation says it's your responsibility, legal is looking into it. And when legal is looking into it, management is looking into it. So it gets a lot of visibility in the organization. And the third thing, the interactions with our third parties are becoming more complex and more diverse. We're getting software, we're using cloud platforms, we are using SaaS services, we're giving information, we're consuming information, we're giving access to individual, we're giving API keys to companies. So the complexity of this whole world grows, and it grows to the point where it cannot be managed anymore just by an Excel spreadsheet. You know, gone are the days of Excel spreadsheets, if you're serious about it. So now the question is, what are the key elements for a successful process and a successful system? And since, again, I said that the major issue is numbers, the key to success is automation. If you do not have a lot of automation in this process, in collecting the data, in processing the data, okay, you're not going to make it. And it's not enough to have the automation in the collection part. You need to put intelligence into it. Because you have hundreds, sometimes thousands of third parties you need to look at. If you try to give the same attention to each and every one of them, you're not going to make it. So you need intelligence into your automation that helps you prioritize your care of specific issues, specific third parties. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you not just look at security posture of your third parties as a score, but if you're able to also put a business context into it. Now here's where things are tricky, because so far we've talked about security posture and things that CISOs understand. But now we're talking about business context. So I need someone from my organization to be able to provide information into this process. So it's not a CISO only process. And I need to facilitate that in a good way. I need to start communicating with all of those parties. As I mentioned, legal, procurement, the business owners. Need to provide a platform that allows everyone to provide information and see how the process goes. A business owner starts a procurement process, okay, and he expects it to end in a week. But then it goes to the CISO and says, well, it's going to take me 2 weeks to vet this. Why? Where are you standing in this process after 2 days, after 3 days? Once you have a platform that allows you transparency, things goes much, much smoother in this process. Now you've finished the vetting and you've come this obstacle, and now you're talking about ongoing monitoring, okay? Because things change. Things change because the third party change. They've added systems. Things change because hackers change and because vulnerabilities are being detected. And you need to be able to constantly get an update on the security posture of your third parties. You need to be very thorough about the information that you collect about them. So it's not just about sending a questionnaire, which is very important, or doing an external threat analysis of their system, which is again important. You need to combine those two. You need to look into their people, because cybersecurity is a lot about human beings. And you take care of your user education. How is your third party doing on that? And there are ways to know that. You can go to social media, for example. You can find out a lot of their user assessment, user education. So we need this into our platform. So you need as much data as you can get into this process. So it's accuracy, it's comprehensiveness, it's the ability to communicate, it's the automation, it's the intelligence, and you need people in this process, and you do not always have them with you on your team that would help mediate this process and make it streamlined, because quite often things get lost in translation between your security team and the other guy's security team. And you need someone who can, hey, this is what they meant, this is what this vulnerability means, this is why someone thinks it's critical for you to remediate, or this is why he came back with an answer saying, we can push this remediation. So clearly, if you're looking for a good process, you need an expert in that process that can help you on the way. And again, sometimes, and we all know that being in security business getting an expert on each and every domain, especially in this domain, is very difficult. So this is a critical point to consider when you're going for a successful process. And I think one of the questions I'd like to go on with is, what are the gaps that you usually find in third parties? But if anyone has a different question that you want to pop up right now, do that. No, I'll take the question about gaps. And we're saying, okay, is there like a typical gap that is found in third parties? And it's kind of like asking, is there like a typical problem in your security posture? And so the answer would have to be no, but what there is there are usually typical reasons for the gaps to exist. One of the things we need to remember, for example, when we are sharing information with partners, we're taking data from our database, for example, where it sits with access control and a specific access control policy that we've built into it, being aware of the value of this data. Think, for example, and I know this is extreme, but it's a daily one, a florist service, which we share our list of employees and their addresses with, because we send them flowers on their anniversaries and birthdays and whatnot. So we take information from our HR database, and we all know that we have strict security policies around our HR database. And usually it ends up as an Excel file with a florist, okay? With, I don't know which access control, okay? And you know, this is where the gaps come from. Let me think of another example. And again, it has to do with the value of information. So we're taking this information and we know it's employee data, and we know that there are a set of regulations that we have to comply with respect to employee data. But you know, that florist, that other party who gets the information from us, well, they don't necessarily consider that employee data. You know, it's just a list of addresses for them. So they might not put in, by default, the controls that we would like them to put. Of course, another reason for the gap would be culture. And I mentioned it when I talked about the human factor. In my organization, we may have a good security culture with a lot of user education, but then handing it over, or you know, think the other way around. I'm providing VPN credentials to a subcontractor, and that subcontractor does not have that user awareness program that we're so adamant about. So here's another potential for a security gap. Size is a reason for a security gap. Think financial organization, medium to large size. Those usually have some kind of threat intelligence service they register to, right? Because they are financial services, they want to know what's happening in the dark web. Now, when they go with subcontractors, even those that have access to IT systems, these are not usually the corporates that would have the funds to contract a threat intelligence service. Here's another gap. Okay? It's the size difference that says, well, they can go so far with their security, and we're so much far away from that. Okay? So all these types of gaps, they create a discrepancy. They are the ones why we need to keep our eye open, and why we need to say, hey, I know that you're used to just moving files around, and for you all the files look the same. But if you want to work with me, now here's how you should handle at least my files. So we need to be aware of that, and not look for the specific gap, like, oh, they're usually vulnerable to this, where I'm not usually vulnerable to that. Although, again, in terms of vulnerability management, for example, in larger organizations usually have better vulnerability management programs. Usually it's easier for them to quickly patch their servers. Smaller organizations, well, not so much. So at least make sure that, with respect to what matters to you, they are on top of things. Some other stuff that you know are interesting about it. I've talked a lot about automation. I talk a lot. A lot about automation and how automation is important, and how the key to a successful program is where you can automatically collect the information, at least about the external assets of your third parties, and be able to do an automated assessment. So the question is, why do we steal questionnaires? Why do we still need questionnaires in this process? A sad answer is because when you are doing an external attack surface analysis, it's just that, it's external attack surface, okay? You do not have an accurate information about internal procedures. You do not have accurate information about the internal security. You can speculate. You can do a good estimate. So a company with a bad external posture is not going to have a better internal one. So you need a questionnaire to get an idea of, or to get a more accurate information about what is going in internally. But you can get so much more from it. For example, you have the same questions in the questionnaire that you are able to get data in an automated way for. Simple one, people heard me saying that. How many web-facing services do you have? And the guy answers 10. And the automated tool says, you have 20. What do you think about their security posture? How well do you trust them to know what's going on? Okay? So you can compare the answers, and you can compare their ability to respond to the questionnaire to an industry standard. So if on the average it takes your third parties 2 days to complete a questionnaire, and there comes one and it takes a week, it says something about their security posture. And the other way. So if you get fast answers to your questionnaire, faster than the average, then yeah, it says something about the security posture of that third party. So this combination of questionnaires, and again, there's a lot to improve there. And there's a lot of automation that can go into this process of questionnaires, and about tailoring the questionnaires to the type of organization that you are parting with, tailoring the size of the questionnaire to the organization that you're working with. You know, it doesn't make sense to send a 500 question questionnaire to a company that does not have a CISO. it doesn't make sense. Okay? So being able to tailor that to the size of the company, to the type of relationship. It's one thing if I give them VPN access into my system. It's another thing if I send them a file once every while, okay? So the questionnaire should be different. So questionnaires are important, and they can provide us more value than just the answers to the questions. We talked about automations, and what's very important to talk about is communication. And again, we tend to think of third-party security risk as, okay, I'm doing an assessment, I'm getting a score, maybe some detailed information, and then I make a decision. But the reality is that it takes time. Okay, the automated assessment is a couple of hours, yay. But then the questionnaire, realistically, it takes a few days. And then there are some disputes on the way. And that person is on vacation, and it takes some more time. And you're the CISO in charge of the process. But there's a business unit there waiting for the outcome, and they don't know what is going on. And on the other side, there's a CISO who needs to answer the questions. But he doesn't get the questionnaire or the questions directly from your CISO. It goes through the business unit, through a salesperson, to that CISO. Now imagine how things can get lost in translation. And then he says, no, it's not right. And it goes to the salesperson, to your business unit manager, and says, hey, Mr. CISO, he said this is not right. So having a platform that takes this information in and electronically distributes it, let people know where the process is, let people know what the actual results are, maintain a common language, let everyone put their updates in the system, let them dispute based on evidence, let you answer based on evidence. That's crucial because, again, I'm going back to it. It's a business thing. And let me be a salesperson for a second. What we're trying to do, and I think the key to this is greasing this whole operation, making sure that it doesn't become an impediment for business, but enabling the business, because modern businesses are about third parties. Modern businesses are about collaboration and subcontracting and outsourcing. And this is a key process for the success of a business to be able to manage the risk. We cannot eliminate the risk, but we need to manage the risk of sharing data, sharing access with third parties, and doing that in the safest and most efficient way that we can do. Thank you.